João Cancelo is not a defender. He is the way Barcelona break down any defensive line. For many years, Barcelona could control matches but struggled against deep defensive blocks, and Cancelo is exactly the solution they lacked. A player not confined to the flank, willing to drift into central areas, creating passing angles, spaces, and moments of play that the old system could not provide. He not only makes Barca more varied in attack, but also upgrades the way the entire team functions, turning stagnant situations into real opportunities and becoming one of the most important factors in how they win. So what makes Cancelo so special? Barcelona have never lacked quality attacking players, but for many years they have consistently faced the same problem when coming up against teams that play a low block. When opponents sit deep with two compact defensive lines, the space in central areas is almost completely suffocated, making line-breaking passes extremely difficult to execute. Barca are then forced to move the ball out wide, circulate it back and forth, and try to stretch the opposition's shape. But most of the time, it only results in control without creating any real breakthrough. The attacks become predictable, out to the flank, cut back, then start again. There are no unexpected movements, no one breaking the defensive structure, and as a result, opponents grow increasingly confident, knowing that simply holding their shape is enough to neutralise the entire system. That is why Barcelona can dominate possession and control the game almost completely, yet still struggle to create clear chances, let alone finish matches off. And that is when João Cancelo appears. Unlike a traditional full-back, he does not stay fixed on the flank waiting for the ball, but instead moves into central areas, operating like a midfielder and occupying the spaces between the lines, where the opponent's defensive structure is hardest to control. This movement creates a very clear effect. Barcelona always have an extra player in the build-up phase, an additional passing option, and more importantly, a new angle of approach that the old system simply did not have. When Cancelo appears in positions that are not his own, the opponent is forced into a decision: either step out to mark him and expose space behind, or hold their shape and allow him time on the ball. And it only takes a moment of hesitation for their once compact defensive structure to begin stretching. That is how Barcelona no longer just circulate the ball around the block, but start to play through it. The biggest difference is that Cancelo does not rely on the system to create chances. He does not wait for a perfect combination, nor does he need fixed positions. He moves on his own, reads situations on his own, and creates solutions in the moment. And that is exactly what makes him the kind of player Barcelona have lacked for many years, someone capable of breaking deadlocks through his own intelligence and skill. The greatest value of João Cancelo does not lie in individual actions, but in the way he reshapes the entire operational structure of Barcelona in each phase of play. When Cancelo moves into central areas and operates as a second midfielder in the build-up, he is not simply adding a man, but changing how the opposition are forced to defend. A full-back appearing in midfield distorts the opponent's lines. Midfielders are drawn deeper to track him, full-backs can no longer hold their natural positions, and the distances between lines begin to stretch. This structural imbalance creates a chain reaction. As central areas attract more defenders to deal with Cancelo, space on the flanks, especially on the far side, immediately opens up. Players like Lamine Yamal are no longer tightly marked in 1v2 situations as before, but begin receiving the ball in more favourable positions, facing forward with space to accelerate or take on 1v1 situations. And with just half a second more and a few extra meters of space, a player like Yamal can significantly increase Barcelona's attacking threat. It does not stop at freeing the flanks. Cancelo also changes how the midfield operates. Previously, almost every attacking move of Barca had to go through the central midfielders, turning them into bottlenecks when tightly marked by the opposition. But with Cancelo, creativity is no longer concentrated in a single line. He can receive the ball directly from the centre-backs, handle pressure on his own, and then deliver line-breaking passes or switch play quickly without going through multiple layers. This allows Barca to shorten their build-up time and disrupt the opponent's defensive rhythm before they can reorganise. More importantly, Cancelo brings an element that the previous system lacked: unpredictability. When a fullback can appear in central areas, push forward like a midfielder, then suddenly drift wide or attack the penalty area, the opposition cannot establish a fixed defensive structure to deal with him. Every time Cancelo moves, the defensive shape is forced to adapt. And in top-level football, those moments of having to adapt are exactly where mistakes occur. As a result, Barcelona are no longer a team that attacks through repetitive patterns. They can overload the centre and suddenly switch play, stretch the opponent's shape and exploit spaces between the lines, or simply create situations that did not previously exist within the system. Cancelo therefore does not just upgrade a position, but transforms the way Barcelona approach the game, turning them from a predictable possession-based side into a team capable of multi-dimensional and almost unreadable attacking play. But everything comes at a cost, and with João Cancelo, that cost lies within Barcelona's defensive structure. When Cancelo pushes high and moves into central areas, he does not just vacate the fullback position, but also disrupts the balance of the entire defensive line. Centre-backs are forced to spread out to cover. The defensive midfielder has to drop deeper, and the whole system loses its natural equilibrium. In possession, this allows Barca to dominate, but the moment they lose the ball, everything shifts instantly. The space left behind Cancelo is not just a gap, but an open channel, one that opponents can exploit through direct passes or high-speed transitions. And because Cancelo often operates in advanced and central areas, the distance he has to cover to recover defensively is significant. This creates a dead moment where the opposition can attack a defensive line that has not yet reorganised. It does not stop at positioning. Cancelo's playing style also increases the level of risk. He is the type of player willing to attempt difficult actions, turning in tight spaces, playing line-breaking passes, or carrying the ball through pressure. These actions create breakthroughs, but if they fail, it is not just a loss of possession, it is a loss of possession in extremely sensitive areas. In those moments, the opponent does not need to build an attack. They simply exploit the space that already exists. In reality, this is not just theoretical. There have been matches where opponents deliberately direct play towards Cancelo's side, not to attack directly, but to wait for the moment he pushes high or loses his position. When that happens, they immediately exploit it with quick counterattacks, forcing Barcelona to retreat in a reactive state. And in such situations, Cancelo not only struggles defensively, but is also more prone to committing tactical fouls, leading to yellow cards, or even the risk of a red. At times, the coaching staff have been forced to substitute him early, not because he lacks value, but because the risk he brings has exceeded what is acceptable in the context of the match. The more deeply Cancelo is involved in the build-up, the more dangerous Barcelona become in possession, but also the more vulnerable they are when they lose the ball. This is not an isolated individual weakness, but an inevitable consequence of a style built on freedom and high creativity. And for that reason, every minute Cancelo is on the pitch is not only an opportunity to make the difference, but also a gamble that Barcelona are forced to accept. You cannot evaluate João Cancelo purely through tactics or statistics. You have to look at the type of player he represents. Cancelo is not a player of absolute consistency, nor someone who always makes the safe choice in every situation. He is the kind of player who lives for moments, actions that may not be repeated often in a match, but are enough to completely change its course. A quick turn to escape pressure, a line-breaking pass, or a sudden forward run, all can become turning points. That is what makes Cancelo a true difference maker. He does not need to control the game for 90 minutes, just one moment at the right time to make the difference. But what makes him even more special is not only how he plays, but how he perceives his role. I'm ready to give my soul for Barcelona, and it's not just a symbolic statement. It reflects a very clear attitude, a player willing to give everything for the club, even when his own future is not guaranteed. Not certain to be kept, not certain to stay long-term, yet still playing with maximum commitment in every minute on the pitch. And in a team searching for identity and stability, a player like Cancelo brings something that cannot be measured tactically, the mentality to make a difference, regardless of the circumstances. Barcelona once had a full-back like that, someone who not only fulfilled defensive duties, but also became a creative hub within the system, Dani Alves. At his peak, Alves did not simply stay wide, but constantly moved, combined with teammates, drifted into central areas, and created connections between midfield and attack. He was not restricted by position, but a living part of how Barcelona functioned, where every touch could open up a dangerous situation. And many years later, João Cancelo is one of the rare names to bring a similar feeling. Not because he replicates Alves in every detail, but because he brings the same mindset. A full-back who can be involved in every phase of the game, from build-up and control to actions in decisive areas. Cancelo does not just fulfill a role, he expands it, turning the full-back position into a genuine creative source. However, the biggest difference lies in the context in which they play. In Alves' era, Barcelona controlled matches almost completely, and the team structure was stable enough to compensate for his constant forward runs. But in modern football, the tempo is faster, transitions happen within seconds, and every space can be exploited immediately. This means the freedom a full-back like Cancelo provides is no longer free. In other words, if Alves was the symbol of a period where creativity could exist within an almost perfect system, then Cancelo represents that same creativity in a far more demanding environment, where every forward movement is not only an opportunity to make a difference, but also a risk the entire team must be prepared to carry. In the end, the story is no longer confined to the pitch, but shifts into a far more complex equation of structure and finance. Barcelona want to keep João Cancelo not only because of his form, but because the tactical role he provides is extremely difficult to replace. At the same time, Cancelo has repeatedly shown his desire to stay, not just through words, but through the way he plays and commits to the team. But the issue is that the wishes of both sides are not enough to complete a deal. Al Hilal still hold the decision-making power, and they have no reason to let a player with contractual value leave for free. A fee, even if not particularly large in the context of modern football, is still something they are entitled to demand. And that is what puts Barcelona in a difficult position, as they do not want, and perhaps cannot, pay a significant amount for a player who has already turned 30, especially while they are still balancing their financing and optimising their wage structure. This turns the deal into something far more complex than a simple keep or not keep decision. It becomes a chain of interconnected choices. If Barca want Cancelo, they must find a way to reduce the cost to the lowest possible level. If Al Hilal refuse to compromise, the pressure shifts onto Cancelo himself, who may have to find a way to terminate his contract or accept a significant pay cut to fit within Barca's wage structure. And that is not an easy decision, especially for a player nearing the latter stages of his peak years. More importantly, Barcelona must ask themselves a strategic question. Are they willing to build a system around a player like Cancelo? Because keeping him is not just about paying a transfer fee or wages, but also about accepting the tactical risks that come with him, and accepting that the system will need to adapt to maximise his strengths. So this is no longer about whether Cancelo is good enough, that is already clear. It is about whether Barcelona are willing to invest, both financially and structurally, to retain a player who can elevate them, but also force them to change. João Cancelo is not just a player. He is a tactical solution that Barcelona have lacked for many years, a source of creativity capable of unlocking deadlocked matches, and the type of player who can change the course of a game in a single moment. What he brings is not only reflected in numbers, but in the way Barcelona play when he is on the pitch, more flexible, more unpredictable, and more dangerous. And that is what matters most. Because when a player not only performs well within a system, but also makes that system better, he is no longer just a signing. He becomes part of how the team functions. So before asking whether Barcelona will keep Cancelo or not, perhaps the real question is, do they already have a truly exceptional player, one who can genuinely change the way a team plays? If you enjoy our video, don't forget to hit like to help this video reach to other football lovers, and hit the subscribe button to follow for more interesting videos about football stories. See you in the next video.